Did you know, in the books, the Riverlands were under the control of the Ironborn and were ruled by Harren the Black? Aegon gave Harren the opportunity to surrender to him, but Harren believed the massive walls of Harrenhal would protect him. However, when the time came, Aegon flew his dragon down from the sky and roasted everyone inside, including Harren's entire family, which would lead to Aegon the Conqueror naming the Greyjoys as the new lords of the Iron Islands. In both book and show, Harrenhal is a ruined castle because of what Aegon did to it, and defeating the Ironborn was the first stop in his conquest of Westeros. He would next face off against the Stormlands in his pursuit to unite the Seven Kingdoms. Aegon was tall, broad-shouldered, and powerful in appearance, with purple eyes and short-cut silver-gold hair. He was very charismatic and commanding. During his conquest, he always wore black fire and a crown made of a simple circlet of Valyrian steel, set with big square-cut rubies. Aegon was seen as an enigma. He was a solitary person whose only friend was Orys Baratheon, who was widely believed to be his bastard half-brother. The king was a great warrior who only rode his dragon, Balerion, for battle or travel and never entered tourneys. Aegon remained faithful to his sisters and left governance in their hands and only took command when necessary. While he was harsh with those who defied him, he was generous to those that bent the knee. Aegon is not considered to have been particularly pious. According to a semi-canon source, he only followed the faith of the Seven for political reasons. Aegon the Conqueror married both his sisters, Visenya and Rhaenys. However, he was only supposed to marry his older sister, Visenya, as per Targaryen tradition, but he might have loved his younger sister, Rhaenys, and decided to reintroduce the old Valyrian tradition of polygamy to marry her too. Visenya is described as cold, harsh, and unforgiving. However, it might have been that she was jealous of her sister since she was the third wheel in the relationship. Aegon spent 10 nights with Rhaenys for every one he spent with Visenya. However, Visenya clearly loved Aegon and did everything she could to protect him. She was the one who established his Kingsguard to protect him. She continually rode with him into battle and risked her life for his. This sister rivalry ultimately culminated in their sons, Aenys and Maegor, who were both very different from each other. House Lannister and House Gardener of the Reach raised an army to 55,000 to face off against Aegon the Conqueror, who only had 11,000 men. However, Aegon and his sister wives combined to unleash all 3 of their dragons on the Lannister and Reach army in what would later be called the Field of Fire. Afterwards, Loren Lannister barely escaped with his life and bent the knee to House Targaryen. However, House Gardener was wiped out and Highgarden was given to the Tyrells. And this is why, throughout Targaryen history, they have always remained loyal to the Targaryens. In the Dance of the Dragons, the Tyrells chose not to fight for Alicent and the Greens, even though that was what was expected of them. And during Robert's Rebellion, they remained loyal despite having no reason to be, unlike the Martells, who only fought because Elia was a hostage. Aegon Targaryen didn't want to steal the throne from his sister Rhaenyra at all, like in the TV show, but was convinced in a different and more interesting way. Fire and Blood reads, "The prince at first refused to be part of his mother's plans. 'My sister is the heir, not me,' he says in Eustace's account. What sort of brother steals his sister's birthright? Only when Sir Criston convinced him that the princess must surely execute him and his brothers should she don the crown did Aegon waver. Whilst any true-born Targaryen yet lives, no strong can hope to sit the Iron Throne," Cole said. "Rhaenyra has no choice but to take your heads if she wishes her bastards to rule after her." It was this, and only this, that persuaded Aegon to accept the crown that a small council was offering him. After being crowned king, Aegon II was meant to show off his beautiful gold dragon, but the show got rid of this in favor of Rhaenys' ridiculous underground attack. Instead, what was meant to happen is that the coronation went to plan, except the defection of one of the Kingsguard who also stole King Viserys' crown. Now, the book reads, "After the coronation, the remaining Kingsguard escorted Aegon to his mount, a splendid creature with gleaming golden scales. Sunfire was the name given this dragon of the Golden Dawn. The king flew thrice around the city before landing inside the walls of the Red Keep. Sir Eric Cargyle led his grace into the torchlit throne room, where Aegon II mounted the steps of the Iron Throne before 1,000 lords and knights. shouts rang through the hall. This would have shown off Aegon's dragon before we see it in action in Season 2. Aegon I may be famous for conquering Westeros, but more impressively is how he held it together. Aegon declared, "The first law of the land shall be the king's peace." King Aegon decreed, "And any lord who goes to war without my leave shall be considered a rebel and an enemy of the Iron Throne." Next, the Maester's right. Each of the conquered kingdoms had its own laws and traditions. King Aegon did little to interfere with those. He allowed his lords to continue to rule much as they always had, with all the same powers and prerogatives. Lastly, King Aegon also issued decrees regularizing customs, duties, and taxes throughout the realm, whereas previously every port and every petty lord had been free to exact however much they could from tenants, small folk, and merchants. He also proclaimed that the holy men and women of the faith were to be exempt from taxation and affirmed the right of the faith's own courts to try and sentence their own. King Viserys wed his son Aegon to his daughter Helena. The groom was 15 years of age and described as a lazy and somewhat sulky boy, who was a glutton at table, given to swilling ale and strong wine, and pinching and fondling any serving girl who strayed within his reach. The bride, his sister, was but 13. Though plumper and less striking than most Targaryens, barely a year in 123 AC, the 14-year-old princess gave birth to twins. A boy she named Jaehaerys, and a girl called Jaehaerys. Prince Aegon had heirs of his own now, the Greens at court proclaimed happily. A dragon's egg was placed in the cradle of each child, and 2 hatchlings soon came forth. However, Alicent and the Green should have definitely married Aegon and Helena off to secure House Tyrell, the Vale, or Riverlands to secure them in the fight against the Black. Tyrion helps to make Aegon Targaryen, Daenerys' nephew, king of Westeros, while talking with Illyroy Mopatis, who says, "The road to Castle Rock does not go through dawn, my little friend. When men are starving and sick of fear, they look for a savior. They may look, but if all they find is Stannis, not Stannis, nor Marcilla." The yellow smile widened. "Another, stronger than Tommen, gentler than Stannis, with a better claim than the girl Marcilla. A savior come from across the sea to bind up the wounds of bleeding Westeros." Fine words. Tyrion was unimpressed. Words are wind. Who is this bloody savior? A dragon. The cheesemonger saw the look on his face at that and laughed. A dragon with 3 heads. However, this dragon is not Daenerys, but Fagon, who was pretending to be Rhaegar's son, but might secretly be Illyroy's son and Varys' nephew. This was Aegon's furious reaction to Rhaenyra's crowning. The book reads, "When word of Rhaenyra's coronation reached the Red Keep the next day, to the great displeasure of Aegon, he said, 'My half-sister and my uncle are guilty of high treason. I want them arrested, and I want them dead.' Cooler heads on the Green Council wish to parley. 'The princess must be made to see that her cause is hopeless,' Grand Maester Orwyle said. 'Brother should not war against sister. Send me to her, that we may talk and reach an amicable accord.' Aegon would not hear of it. Septon Eustace tells us that his grace accused the Grand Maester of disloyalty and spoke of having him thrown into a black cell, with your black friends. But when the 2 queens, his mother, Queen Alicent, and his wife, Queen Helena, spoke in favour of Orwyle's proposal, the truculent king gave way reluctantly. The key to winning the Dance of the Dragons is the Riverlands, since the Green forces in Oldtown and Castle Rock need to cross the Riverlands to get to King's Landing. The book reads, "Which left only the Riverlords, a notoriously quarrelsome lot ruled over, in name at least, by House Tully of Riverrun. We have friends in the Riverlands," Daemon said, "though not all of them dare share their colours yet. We need a place where they can gather, a toehold on the mainland, large enough to house a sizable host, and strong enough to hold against whatever forces the usurper can send against us." He showed the lords a map. Here, Harrenhal, and so it was decided. Prince Daemon would lead the assault on Harrenhal, riding Caraxes. Princess Rhaenyra would remain on Dragonstone until she had recovered her strength. The Valyrian fleet would close off the Gullet, sailing forth from Dragonstone and Driftmark to block all ships entering or leaving Blackwater Bay. Did you know, in the books, this is how blood was captured? 2 days after, blood was seized at the Gate of the Gods trying to leave King's Landing with the head of Prince Jaehaerys hidden in one of his saddle sacks. Under torture, he confessed that he had been taking it to Harrenhal to collect his reward from Prince Daemon. He also gave up a description of the whore he claimed had hired them, an older woman, foreign by her talk. The other harlots called her Misery. After 13 days of torment, Blood was at last allowed to die. Queen Alicent had commanded Larys Clubfoot to learn his true name so that she might bathe in the blood of his wife and children, but our sources do not say if this occurred. Sir Luther Largent and his gold cloaks searched the Street of Silk from top to bottom, but no trace of cheese or the white worm was ever found. Aegon II emerges as a surprisingly likable character, ignoring, of course, what he did to Diana in episode 8 of season 1. Aegon was actually pretty nice, wanting to return sheep to the shepherd and feeling bad that the guy came all this way. Not only that, but he was also the funniest character in the episode for this season, with his interactions with his wife and the rats being humorous. His conversations with Larys, his boys on the Iron Throne, and letting his son annoy Tywin Lannister at the small council meeting brought much needed levity. He's kind of like Joffrey, doing what he wants, but isn't sadistic. Sadly though, after what happens at the end of episode 1 with Blood and Cheese, we'll probably get a less fun and more angry version of him now, which is a shame since the actor is doing a really spectacular job of making him likable considering. Did you know, in the books, Daemon had a special friend who he trusted utterly, who knew the wine sinks and rat pits that festered in the shadow of the Red Keep, as well as Daemon himself? Amidst the stews of Flea Bottom, Prince Daemon's go-between found suitable instruments. One had been a sergeant in the City Watch, big and brutal. He had lost his gold cloak for beating a whore to death whilst in a drunken rage. The other was a rat catcher in the Red Keep. Their true names are lost to history. They are remembered as Blood and Cheese. Cheese knew the Red Keep better than the shape of his own, Mushroom tells us. The hidden doors and secret tunnels that Maegor the Cruel had built were as familiar to the Ratcatcher as the rats he hunted. Using a forgotten passageway, Cheese led Blood into the heart of the castle, unseen by any guard. Aegon had all the advantages at the start of the Dance of the Dragons, including the biggest and richest cities of Westeros supporting him. Old Town, King's Landing, and Lannisport. Every visible symbol of legitimacy belonged to Aegon. He sat the Iron Throne, he lived in the Red Keep, he wore the Conqueror's crown, wielded the Conqueror's sword, and had been anointed by a Septon of the Faith before the eyes of tens of thousands. Grand Maester Orwyle sat in his councils, and the Lord Commander of the Kingsguard, Criston Cole, had placed the crown upon his head. And he was male, which in the eyes of many made him the rightful king. Against all that, Rhaenyra's advantages were few. Some older lords might recall the oaths they had sworn when she was made her father's heir, though how many would still fight for her now that she was a woman wed, her body aged and thickened by 6 childbirths. The fall of Harrenhal to Prince Daemon came as a great shock to Aegon and the Greens. Until that moment, Aegon II had believed his half-sister's cause to be hopeless. Harrenhal left his grace feeling vulnerable for the first time. The subsequent defeats at the Burning Mill and Stonehenge came as further blows, and made the king realize that his situation was more perilous than it had seemed. These fears deepened as ravens returned from the Reach, where the Greens had believed themselves the strongest. House Hightower and Oldtown were solidly behind King Aegon, and his grace had the Arbor too. But elsewhere in the south, other lords were declaring for Rhaenyra, including Lord Tarly of Hornhill, Samwell Tarly's house, and many other powerful houses. Loudest amongst these traitors was Sir Alan Beesbury, Lord Lyman's heir, who was demanding the release of his grandsire from the dungeon where most believed the former Master of Coin to be confined. After the fall of Harrenhal, many houses in the Reach declared for Aegon. House Tyrell saw this support for Rhaenyra from their own bannermen, and the mother of the young Lord Tyrell of Highgarden, acting as regents for the boy, who can be seen as a Marjorie Tyrell meet Lysa Tully, suddenly thought better of their support for King Aegon and decided House Tyrell would take no part in this struggle. King Aegon began to drown his fears in strong wine at this news. Sir Otto sent word to his nephew, Lord Ormond Hightower, beseeching him to use the power of Oldtown to put down this rash of rebellions in the Reach. Other blows followed: the Vale, White Harbour, Winterfell. The Blackwoods and other river lords streamed toward Harrenhal and Prince Daemon's banners. The Sea Snake's fleets closed Blackwater Bay. This was King Aegon's response to the murder of his son. Aegon desired to avenge the murder of his heir by means of an attack on Dragonstone, descending on the island citadel on Dragonback to seize or slay his half-sister and her bastard sons. It took all of the Green Council to dissuade him. Sir Criston Cole urged a different course. The pretender princess had made use of stealth and treachery to kill Prince Jaehaerys, Cole said. Let them do the same. We will pay the princess back in her own bloody coin, he told the king. The instrument the Lord Commander of the Kingsguard chose for the king's vengeance was his sworn brother, Sir Arryk Cargyle. Sir Arryk was intimately familiar with the ancient seat of House Targaryen, having visited there often during the reign of King Viserys. It would be a simple thing to deliver Cargyle to the fishing village under the castle. From there, he could make his own way to the Queen. This is how Aegon Targaryen's body is described after his battle with Rhaenys at Rook's Rest. King Aegon II did not die, though his burns brought him such pain that some say he prayed for death. Carried back to King's Landing in a closed litter to hide the extent of his injuries, his grace did not rise from his bed for the rest of the year. Septons prayed for him, maesters attended him with potions and milk of the poppy, but Aegon slept 9 hours out of every 10, waking only long enough to take some meagre nourishment before he slept again. None was allowed to disturb his rest, save his mother, the Queen Dowager, and his hand, Sir Criston Cole. His wife never so much as made the attempt. So lost was Helena in her own grief and madness. Aemond was also named Protector of the Realm and Prince Regent. Sir Criston Cole remained the hand of the king, but Aemond did not take the crown for himself. This is what happened to Aegon's dragon after fighting Rhaenys Targaryen. The king's dragon, Sunfire, too huge and heavy to be moved and unable to fly with his injured wing, remained in the fields beyond Rook's Rest, crawling through the ashes like some great golden Wyram. In the early days, he fed himself upon the burned carcasses of the slain. When those were gone, the men Sir Criston had left behind to guard him brought him calves and sheep. This is what happened when Jace went to the Vale. The book tells us, when Jacaerys Valyrion descended upon the Eyrie on his young dragon Vermax to win the Vale of Arryn for his mother, the Maiden of the Vale, Lady Jean Arryn, was 35, 20 years his senior. Never wed, Lady Jean had reigned over the Vale since the death of her father and elder brothers, and supported Rhaenyra in order to ensure her own claim to the Eyrie. It looks as though Aegon's injuries are going to mirror his dad, with him maybe wearing a face mask similar to the gold one that King Viserys wore in the first season of House of the Dragon. We also learn that Aegon's dragon, Sunfire, has suffered significant injuries, but remains alive, so plot-wise that will be very important in season 3 or 4 of the show. Now, with Aegon's severe burns and part of his armor melting into his skin, he probably will take on the appearance of someone who has aged significantly just like his dad. Moreover, Grand Maester Orwyle believes Aegon may have internal injuries and a broken leg, meaning he'll walk with a limp just like his dad. We might even have a scene where Aegon walks into a room similar to Viserys at the end of episode 8, donning a face mask, cane, and limp with a thick robe to hide the extent of his injuries, mirroring his father. Larys has a pretty touching moment with Aegon where he gives some pretty good advice after instructing the nurse to withhold milk of the puppy for Aegon. He tells the king, "The drink takes the pain away, but it dulls your mind." Which is true, and probably what Aemon wants for his brother now. Larys then hits him with the truth. You will never be whole. Orwyle has exhausted his capabilities. Your mind is all that remains to you. I do not say that gladly. From Larys' speech, it seems as though Alice Rivers, the one messing with Daemon's head, is the one who cursed Larys to be a clubfoot. Then Larys imparts some of his best wisdom. People will pity you behind your back, or in your presence, and they will stare, and they will underestimate you, and this will be your advantage. This should hopefully motivate Aegon to make some pretty cool decisions later in the series. The First Dornish War ended after 9 years when Prince Namor Martell sent a letter to Aegon the Conqueror in King's Landing. After reading it, Aegon, who struggled to conquer Dorne, was said to have blood dripping from his hands and then burnt the letter before going to Dragonstone and calling for peace. So what was possibly written in the letter? The main theory readers have was that Aegon's deceased wife, Rhaenys, may have still been alive and was being kept hostage by Dorne. Perhaps they would keep her alive and well in exchange for Aegon's peace. And if he continued to war against Dorne, they would do unspeakable things to her as retribution, forcing Aegon to completely give up on his conquest of his Seventh Kingdom and even visit Dorne to constantly renew his peace with them and maybe receive word from her. Do you think she was alive? Comment below. HBO is working on what they call a very big budget show set within the Game of Thrones universe that can only really be Aegon's conquest. And they got the guy from the latest Batman film working on it. So hopefully they can do 1 season on Aegon's conquest, 1 season on the Dornish Wars, 2 seasons on Maegor and Aenys, and another 2 seasons on King Jaehaerys the Conciliator. Obviously, this is just speculation, but it would be amazing. Tyrion meets a young man claiming to be Aegon Targaryen, the supposedly dead son of Rhaegar. The show skips this completely, but in the books, Tyrion travels with young Griff and quickly realizes he's no ordinary boy. He's clever, proud, and ambitious, but hesitant to invade Westeros without Daenerys and her dragons. That's when Tyrion delivers one of his political plays. Westeros is torn and bleeding. Be certain you reach Westeros before my sister falls, and someone more competent takes her place. When Aegon asks how he could win without Daenerys, Tyrion replies, "You do not need to win. All you need to do is raise your banners and hold." Tyrion isn't just advising a prince, he's forging one. In that moment, we see it. Words can spark wars, and strategy can crown kings. The young, bold squire, who is secretly a Targaryen, has the most messed up siblings imaginable. Aegon's older brother, Aerion, threw Aegon's pet cat down a well and once visited Aegon in his bedroom during the dead of night, put a knife to Aegon's privates, and joked about removing his genitals so he would become a girl whom Aerion could marry. Also, Aegon's sister, Rhae, slipped a love potion into his drink so that he would marry her and not their sister, Daela, to whom he might have been betrothed. Aegon did not wish to marry, instead dreaming of becoming a knight of the Kingsguard, who are sworn not to wed. His eldest brother Daeron is a drunk who abandons young Egg so he can drink himself into a stupor. The Tyrell bannermen might betray the Tyrells and Lannisters by supporting Aegon Targaryen. The evidence for this indicates that 2 of Mace Tyrell's strongest bannermen, Randall Tarly and Mathis Rowan, might join Fagon. As we know, Sam Randall is not a good guy and probably despises the fat and aloof Mace. He might also have resentment over Brightwater Keep being awarded to House Tyrell instead of House Tarly, to which his wife, Melissa Florent, has a claim. Next, Mathis Rowan appears upset when Tywin Lannister talks about conceding justice to Doran Martell over the deaths of Elia Martell and her children during the sack of King's Landing. Randall will also have Marjorie in his possession, making her a valuable hostage. But what do you think? Tyrion met Jon Conington, the man who raised Aegon and will one day be his hand of the king against Daenerys. Tyrion watched the sellsword read. That he could read said something all by itself. How many sellswords could boast of that? He hardly moves his lips at all, Tyrion reflected. Finally, Griff looked up from the parchment. Has Ilroy taken leave of his senses? Why does he imagine that her grace would welcome the service of a self-confessed kingslayer and betrayer? A fair question, thought Tyrion. But what he said was, the king I slew was sitting on her throne, and all those I betrayed were lions. So it seems to me that I have already done the queen good service. Have no fear, I won't kill you. You are no kin of mine. There is blood between Targaryen and Lannister. Why would you support the cause of Queen Daenerys? For gold and glory, the dwarf said cheerfully. Oh, and hate. I understand hate well enough. From the way Griff said the word, Tyrion knew that much was true. He was supped on hate himself, this one. It has warmed him in the night for years. Then we have that much in common, sir. I am no knight. Not only a liar, but a bad one. That was clumsy and stupid, my lord. And yet Sir Duck says you knighted him. Duck talks too much. This is what Egg, or Aegon, was like as king. Egg was crowned Lord of the Seven Kingdoms in 233 AC, at the age of 33. From the beginning of his reign, his oldest and most trusted companion, Duncan the Tall, stood at his side as a member of the Kingsguard, eventually rising to become Lord Commander. One of Aegon's first acts as king was the arrest of Lord Brendan Rivers, known as Bloodraven, who had served as Hand of the King. Bloodraven had promised safe conduct to Aenys Blackfyre so he could attend the Great Council, only to have him executed upon arriving in King's Landing. Though most were relieved to see another Blackfyre pretender eliminated, Aegon believed the Crown's word must mean something. To prove that the Iron Throne's promises could not be broken without consequence, he condemned Bloodraven to death. Yet, instead of carrying out the sentence, Aegon commuted it to exile in the Night's Watch. This is how he gets north of the Wall to become Bran's teacher. Aegon's brother, Maester Aemon, chose to join the Watch as well, removing himself from any faction that might attempt to use his claim against the king. They were accompanied north by many of Bloodraven's loyal, Raven's Teeth, and other prisoners released to take the Black. At Aegon's command, Sir Duncan travelled with them to ensure Aemon reached Eastwatch by the Sea safely. Aegon's reign opened amid a brutal winter lasting from 230 AC to 236 AC. Determined to ease suffering, he sent vast shipments of food and grain to the starving north, though critics argued he was overly generous. When winter finally broke, the Fourth Blackfyre Rebellion erupted in 236 AC. Daemon III Blackfyre invaded with the Golden Company, but found little support. Aegon and his sons rode out to confront the threat, and Duncan slew Daemon in single combat, crushing the rebellion while Bittersteel escaped across the Narrow Sea. It looks like HBO are thinking of making Aegon's conquest either into a movie or TV show. HBO have to choose between a feature film by Buer Willimon, Andor, and a television series by Mattison Tomlin, The Batman. This rival development has sparked a debate over which format best serves the epic scale of the Targaryen conquest. The movie argument would be Dune-sized and offers the massive budget necessary to properly depict Aegon's dragons and the large-scale battles of the conquest, and no budget cutting, like we saw in House of the Dragon Season 2. However, the constraint of a 2 to 3 hour runtime might force the film to rush the story. The TV show argument is that it would allow for deeper character development, particularly for Aegon's sister wives, Visenya and Rhaenys. While the long-form format is HBO's specialty, the financial burden of constant dragon CGI is a major hurdle. This is what Aegon the Conqueror did before invading Westeros. Aegon was born on Dragonstone, 27 years before his conquest to Lord Aeron Targaryen and Lady Valenna Valerion. Following Valyrian customs, Aeron married his older sister Visenya out of duty and Rhaenys out of desire. Aegon claimed Balerion for his own prior to his marriage. When Pentos and Tyrosh asked Aegon for his aid in their conflict against Volantis, Aegon flew to Pentos atop of Balerion to meet with the Prince of Pentos and the city's magisters. Aegon next flew to Lys, where he burnt a Valentian fleet before it could attempt to invade the city. After this, Aegon's interest in Westeros grew. He had previously visited the Citadel of Oldtown and the Arbor in the Kingdom of the Reach with his elder sister Visenya, and he might have also visited Lannisport in the Kingdom of the Rock. He had a huge wooden table made, cut in the shape of Westeros, with a map of the 7 kingdoms of Westeros painted upon the surface. The Storm King, Argilac Durrandon, reached out to Aegon, proposing a marriage between Aegon and his only daughter, Princess Argilla. All the lands east of the God's Eye from the Trident to the Blackwater Rush were offered as her dowry, although the lands did not belong to Argilac. His offer was an attempt to create a buffer between his own kingdom and that of Harrion Hoare, King of the Isle and the Rivers. Aegon spurnt the offer, stating he had no need of a third wife, and instead offered his close friend and rumoured half-brother bastard Orys Baratheon as Argilla's husband instead, in return for all the lands surrounding the Blackwater Bay, including those possessed by Argilac. Insulted, Argilac cut off the hands of Aegon's envoy and sent those back to Dragonstone. Aegon called his supporters together in response to Argilac. After 6 days of consulting, Aegon sent forth ravens to every lord in Westeros, declaring his claim to rule the continent as its sole king. Aegon and his sisters prayed to the 7 in the Sept at Dragonstone the night before beginning their war. This is how Aegon's sister Visenya and Vhagar took the Eyrie. So after King Torrhen Stark bent the knee to Aegon, the Conqueror parted way with his sister queens. Aegon turned south once again, marching toward Oldtown. Whilst Rhaenys flew to Sunspear and the Deserts of Dawn, and Visenya mounted Vhagar and flew to the Vale of Arryn, Shara Arryn had strengthened the defences of Goldtown, moved a strong host to the Bloody Gate, and tripled the size of the garrison in Stone, Snow, and Sky, the way castles that guarded the approach to the Eyrie. All these defences proved useless against Visenya Targaryen, who rode Vhagar's leathery wings above them all and landed in the Erie's inner courtyard. When the Regent of the Vale rushed out to confront her with a dozen guards at her back, she found Visenya with Ronald Arryn seated on her knee, staring at the dragon wonderstruck. "Mother, can I go flying with a lady?" the boy king asked. No threats were spoken, no angry words exchanged. The two queens smiled at one another and exchanged courtesies instead. Then Lady Shara sent for the 3 crowns, her own regent's coronet, her small son's crown, and the falcon crown of mountain and vale that the Arryn kings had worn for 1,000 years, and surrendered them to Queen Visenya along with the swords of her garrison. And it was said afterward that the little king flew thrice around the summit of the giant's lance and landed to find himself a little lord. Thus did Visenya Targaryen bring the Vale of Arryn into her brother's realm. This is how Aegon the Conqueror took the Stormlands and created House Baratheon. Argilac Durrandon, the elderly Storm King, clumsily offered Aegon the hand of his maiden daughter, Argilla, with a dowry consisting of the lands once controlled by the Stormlands, but now under the control of the Ironborn under House Hoare. Aegon refused and instead offered Orys Baratheon, Aegon's childhood friend and champion, who was also rumoured to be Aegon's bastard half-brother, to Argilac's daughter Argella.
Enraged, Argilac had the hands of Aegon's envoy cut off and sent to Aegon with a message. "These are the only hands your bastard shall have of me." Therefore, after landing at the mouth of the Blackwater and the burning of Harrenhal, Aegon sent Orys and his other sister wife, Rhaenys, to conquer the Stormlands. Argilac refused to die in the same manner as Harren and called his banners to Storm's End. Before the battle, known as the Last Storm, Rhaenys Targaryen atop Meraxes scouted Argilac Durrandian's movements, while Orys Baratheon fortified a strong defensive position in the hills south of Bronzegate. As the two armies closed on each other, a massive storm broke out, with the rain blowing against the Targaryen host. Argilac, knowing he had almost twice as many as the Targaryens and 4 times as many knights and heavy horse, decided to press the attack. Initial charges by Argilac's horsemen were slowed by muddy ground and steep slopes. His spearmen had greater success on foot, however, and the Durrandon host conquered 2 hills. Argilac's 4th charge broke through the enemy center, only to meet Rhaenys atop Meraxes. With the dragon grounded because of the storm, the Queen unleashed Dragonflame on Durrandian's van. Argilac's personal guard were burnt as well, and the Storm King was thrown from his saddle in the confusion. Argilac slew 6 men and held off another 6 as Orys rode down the hill and dismounted. When Argilac refused Orys' offer to yield, the pair began single combat. Each took a wound, but soon Argilac would get his wish and die fighting. His death ended the battle as the Stormlanders yielded or fled. After her father's death, Princess Argilla Durrandian barred Storm's End and declared herself Storm Queen. Her garrison, however, feared to share the fate of Harren and revolted against Argilla after a few days, delivering her to Orys chained and naked. Orys treated Argilla gently, removing the chains, covering her with his cloak, and giving her food and wine. Afterward, Orys married Argilla and became Lord Paramount of the Stormlands. He took the sigil and the words of House Durrandian for his own family, the newly founded House Baratheon. This is how House Martell spat in the face of Aegon the Conqueror. Aegon flew to Oldtown to secure it for his conquest. Meanwhile, Rhaenys was sent to Dorne. She found all the castles abandoned and their lords in hiding. Finally, the Queen's flight took her to Sunspear, the ancient seat of House Martell, where she found the Princess of Dawn waiting in her abandoned castle. Meria Martell was 80 years of age, the Maesters tell us, and had ruled the Dornishmen for 60 of those years. She was a very fat, blind, and almost bald, her skin sallow and sagging. Argilac the Arrogant had named her the Yellow Toad of Dawn. But neither age nor blindness had dulled her wits. "I will not fight you," Princess Meria told Rhaenys, "nor will I kneel to you. Dawn has no king. Tell your brother that." "I shall," Rhaenys replied. "But we will come again, Princess, and the next time we shall come with fire and blood." "Your words," said Princess Meria. "Ours are unbowed, unbent, unbroken. You may burn us, my lady, but you will not bend us, break us, or make us bow. This is Dawn. You are not wanted here. Return at your peril." Thus, Queen and Princess parted, and Dawn remained unconquered. Rhaenys would later die in the First Dornish War, and House Martell would remain unbent to Aegon the Conqueror. This was the life of Balerion the Black Dread under Aegon and Maegor. Balerion was born in Valyria and was one of the 5 dragons Aener Targaryen brought with him when he fled to Dragonstone to survive the doom of Valyria. After the other 4 of Aenar's dragons died, Balerion became the last creature to have seen the Freehold in its prime. Balerion was claimed by Lord Aegon Targaryen before his marriage to his sisters Visenya and Rhaenys. Balerion's fire was later used to help forge the Iron Throne. Balerion was used to win the battle at Harrenhal against the Ironmen and at the Field of Fire against the Lannisters and Gardeners of the Reach. 2 years after his conquest, Aegon flew his dragon to the Iron Islands to end the succession struggle among the Ironborn and place the Greyjoys in charge. Balerion fought in the First Dornish War. After the death of Aegon the Conqueror, Balerion was claimed by his younger son, Prince Maegor, who had not claimed another dragon because he considered all others unworthy. After Jonos Arryn imprisoned his brother Ronald, Lord of the Eyrie, and declared himself independent of the Iron Throne, Maegor rode the Black Dread to the Vale of Arryn and put down his rebellion. When Maegor was exiled to Pentos as punishment for his polygamous marriage, he took Balerion with him. After the death of his elder brother, King Aenys I, Maegor flew back to Westeros on Balerion to claim the Iron Throne. During the Faith Militant Uprising, King Maegor used Balerion in the burning of the Sept of Remembrance and in the battle at the Green Fork of the Blackwater Rush. In the Westerlands, the king burnt the seats of House Broom, Doggett, Falwell, and Lorch. Maegor threatened to attack Oldtown as well, but the city opened its gates to the king after the unexpected death of the High Septon. In the battle beneath the God's Eye, Maegor used Balerion to kill his nephew, Prince Aegon, and his dragon Quicksilver. After the completion of the Red Keep, Maegor began construction of the Dragon Pit to house Balerion, Vhagar, and other dragons. After Maegor's death, Balerion returned to Dragonstone. This was the life of Vhagar under King Aegon and Maegor. Vhagar emerged from a dragon egg on Dragonstone during the Century of Blood. Eventually, she was claimed by Visenya Targaryen. Following Aegon's first coronation, Visenya, upon Vhagar, accompanied the Targaryen fleet, commanded by Daemon Valerion, to take Gulltown. In the battle, the Arryn fleet defeated the Targaryen fleet until Visenya descended on Vhagar and burnt the ships of the Arryn fleet. Vhagar took part in the decisive Field of Fire, then Visenya flew Vhagar to the Vale and secured it for Aegon. Vhagar also took part in the failed Dornish Wars. After Aegon I's death, King Aenys I Targaryen named his eldest son and heir, Prince Aegon, the Prince of Dragonstone, at his wedding. Visenya angrily left for Dragonstone. It was said that the moon turned as red as blood when Vhagar passed it. Later that year, when King Aenys arrived at Dragonstone, fleeing the first rebels in the Faith Militant Uprising, Visenya asked him to grant her leave to take Vhagar and burn the Starry Sept in Oldtown. Aenys refused. When the king died early in 42 AC, Visenya left Dragonstone within an hour of his death and flew to Pentos, where her son Maegor lived in exile. After Maegor had claimed the crown on Dragonstone, Visenya accompanied him upon Vhagar and crossed Blackwater Bay to King's Landing. The return of both Vhagar and Balerion to King's Landing set off riots in the city. Prior to Maegor's wedding to Tiana of the Tower, Visenya flew upon Vhagar to Driftmark to convince Alyssa Valerion to appear at the wedding. When the Faith Militant continued to resist Maegor's reign, even after the losses they suffered at the Battle of Stonebridge and the Great Fork, Visenya mounted Vhagar and burnt the seats of House Blantyre, Terrick, Teddings, Leicester, and Wayne in the Riverlands, exterminating them within a single night. Maegor did the same with Balerion in the Westerlands to House Broom, Doggett, Falwell, Lorch, Myatt, and other pious lords who had defied his royal commands. In 43 AC, Maegor and Visenya turned towards Oldtown, threatening to incinerate the Starry Sept in response to the High Septon's condemnment of Maegor's polygamous marriages. Only the mysterious death of the High Septon, which allowed Lord Martin Hightower to open his gates before Balerion and Vhagar, saved the city from dragonfire. Visenya died a year later, leaving Vhagar without a rider.